The opinions expressed in this video are entirely that of the content creator. If you don't like them, suck it.
Hello there, welcome to Brian Lomax Movie Talk and the latest 31 on 31. Been a long time coming, we should have done this last month, but we, for various reasons, ran over to January. This one, special one, it is all the films of three of the biggest directors working today, three of my favourite directors working today, or any day for that matter. Christopher Nolan, Quentin Tarantino, and David Fincher. So yes, currently as it stands, if you tot up all their films, depending on how you deal with Kill Bill, we have 31 movies. You know how it works. We start with the worst, we work our way to the best. I say worst, what I mean is least good, because this is the first 31 on 31 that we've done where literally there is not one single stinker on this list. Given some of the tripe we've had to do on these 31 on 31s, this list is a blessing. As usual, I am not alone in this endeavour. Now, there's supposed to be 6 of us doing it this time around. So there's me, Cody Leach, Sean Chandler, Willie Screedier, Mother Mayhem, and new addition Zach Pope. However, 3 of those are up in the air. So I really don't know who's joining me on this. I know Cody Leach for sure, Zach Pope, it's pretty certain. The other 3 have got various issues going on, so I don't know whether they're going to be able to make it or not. But look out for videos by all 6 of us, and if 3 of those don't quite make it, just expect that. Anyway, like I say, do check out whoever else does it, check out their videos. So let's get into it. At number 31, we've got Christopher Nolan's debut feature film, Following. Now, like I say, I like this film. I think it's a very good film, very well made. I just think that the production value lets it down a bit. This is a film that was self-financed, truly independent. It wasn't studio-backed in any way, shape or form. Nolan made it over the course of a year, on weekends, getting together with his friends. Actors who, yes, they are actors. They've done work. They've been paid for acting work, but they're not. You're not going to see them winning any awards anytime soon, I don't think. If Nolan had had a budget, these wouldn't have been the actors he would have picked. I doubt very much. So that does let it down a little bit in some areas. But no, for a debut film on very little money, it's got a really great script. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's tightly edited. So yeah, fantastic debut that showcases that right from the start, Nolan was somebody to take notice of. Number 30 is Alien 3. This film is probably the one on this list that I would imagine most people are going to put at the bottom. I don't know. To me, I still find it entertaining, particularly if you go for the assembly cut, which is kind of the only cut I watch these days, to be honest. It's been a long time since I saw a theatrical. But yeah, even that cut does have issues, mainly the opening with regards to what they do to Newt and Hicks. Obviously that is something that is very hard to swallow, very hard to get over. But once you get over that hurdle and you take the rest of the film on those terms, on its own terms, then I think it's actually quite a decent film. Clearly no way close to being as good as Alien or Aliens, but still a pretty solid Alien flick. I came to The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, David Fincher's version of it at any rate, the remake, after having seen the original Swedish version, and I think that kind of sours the taste a bit for this film. It's expertly directed. You know, I've checked out quite a few essays, video essays on YouTube of people kind of dissecting both versions, and you can see how how Fincher is clearly a much more experienced, kind of just seasoned director. He knows his stuff a lot more, shall we say, but also he had a bigger budget at his disposal. But you know, I won't get into comparisons between the two directors any more than that, but I still saw the original first, and it made such an impact on me. I thought it was so well made, so brilliantly done. I thought that Noomi Rapace in that role was better as well. That I just, yeah, I still gravitate towards that original film. You know, even if Fincher might do a few more flashier things with the camera, even if he might have, yeah, better technique, shall we say. After watching Fincher's version, it was a film that I instantly could appreciate, but didn't necessarily love. And I think I probably would have loved it if I hadn't seen that original first. At number 28, and at the risk of getting Fincher heavy at the bottom here, believe me, Fincher is one of my favourite directors. You're going to see quite a few of his towards the top. But yeah, it's Curious Case of Benjamin Button. This is a film that I wasn't that keen on, to be honest, first time I watched it. And in fact, when we had the idea of making this list, it was the one that I thought was probably going to end up on the bottom of the list. But on a repeat watching it for the second time in preparation for this, and then reviewing it on my channel, I appreciated it a lot more. I got a lot more invested in it. I still don't warm to Cate Blanchett's character all that much, but I do warm particularly well to the central character, Benjamin. I think Brad Pitt gives an excellent performance. I think the special effects are really brilliantly used. And I just think, yeah, it's an odyssey. And it's an odyssey written by the guy who gave us Forrest Gump. But for me personally, and I know this is sacrilege to a lot of people, I feel like it's a better film than Forrest Gump. I just think when you take away the mental kind of side of things, that, you know, it's like, it's the Robert Downey Jr. in Tropic Thunder, never go full retard kind of thing that I just can't kind of escape from when I'm watching Forrest Gump. Having seen Tropic Thunder, now when I see Forrest Gump, I'm like, yes, is he going full retard there, Hanks? You know, again, not to get into a comparison, I just think that this film does a lot of what Forrest Gump does. You can tell it's from the same writer, but I do think that it's a better film. I know that Fincher fans are really starting to get worried now. They're all shouting at the screen at me, but I love The Game. I reviewed it on my channel recently. I gave it 4 stars. I gave it a 4-star review. It's a film I went to the cinema to see by myself on one of only 2 occasions that I skipped school. One of those occasions I went to the cinema by myself and I watched The Game, and there was one other guy in the cinema. I remember that specifically for some reason. He was sat behind me over at the back and I was in the middle, and I watched The Game. I didn't know who Fincher was at the time. I had seen Alien, I had seen Seven, but I wasn't enough of a movie maniac to know Fincher by name. But I watched The Game and I loved it, fell in love with it. It's a film I've seen many times. I think the ending has problems. I think it's asking a bit too much from the audience. But other than that, the journey, the ride that it takes you on is very good. It's, you know, it's kind of like Scrooge, but kind of told through a modern lens, so to speak. It has that Scrooge vibe about it. But no, yeah. It's a film I really like. So please, Fincher fans, you know, I know this has been a lot of Fincher movies right on the bottom here. Don't be upset with me. I still love these films. Fincher is still one of my favourite directors. You know, he's in my top 10 directors, easy. This is just a very, very, very strong list. It just so happens that, you know, that he's up against Tarantino and Nolan. So yeah. So if you're not upset enough already, let's get into my next one. Panic Room. Yes, another Fincher film. I love Panic Room. Again, I gave it 4 stars. This isn't like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre thing, you know, where I put them all on the bottom because I hate them. It's just the way it's rolled. All right, it just so happens this is the way it's rolled. But yeah, the Panic Room. I love it. It's a great thriller. I just what can I say? I think it's highly entertaining. I think he's got some great central performances. I think the central conceit is one that allows for much tension to be drawn out of the story. It's it sets up. It's one of them stick in one location kind of films, but done really really well. Very cinematic. Fincher finds ways to make cinema out of what is essentially theatre. When you've got a few actors trapped in one spot, that can feel like theatre, but Fincher finds a way to make this very cinematic. It's a really great film. At number 25 we have Death Proof. I think this is Tarantino's weakest film. If you don't count things like Four Rooms, where he only did a segment, things like that. But like, of his feature films that he's done, this is his weakest, which just shows you how talented he is as a director. That it isn't on the bottom of the list. It's a grindhouse movie. I think it loses that grindhouse element in the second half. In the first half, you've got all the negative dirt, the scratches, and all that kind of stuff on the film, and that seems to be just done away with in the second half. Like he just got bored of doing it, and fine, whatever. But if you're making a grindhouse film, make a grindhouse film all the way through. But beyond that, it's a really gripping tale about these two groups of women, one who are overcome by this madman, and the second one who overcome this madman. And it's just, great performances all round. Some of the dialogue isn't quite up to scratch for a Tarantino movie, but it's just highly entertaining. Mank is a love letter to Hollywood, and I think it's a very good one. I know a lot of people have been pretty down on this film. They kind of not taken to it the way that they have with most of Fincher's work. But I really got something out of it. I liked this central figure, this central character, Mankiewicz, who's played by Gary Oldman. A really great performance by Gary Oldman, actually. He reins it in at times, where in previous performances I see he might have gone a bit larger with it. Not that that's a bad thing. He's a great actor. When he goes large, I love it when he goes large. But yeah, there's times in this film where he reins it in. He's a bit more subdued. He's a bit more subtle with it. But yeah, it's a great performance. It's really well directed. It's a nice insight, a nice inside look into the making of a widely regarded classic film, Citizen Kane, and the forces that came together to bring that film to the screen. Obviously, Orson Welles gets pretty much all the credit in most circles, but actually, if it ain't on the stage, or if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage. So without that script, which Mankiewicz wrote, then Orson Welles wouldn't have had the film he had. So it's a love letter to screenwriters. And number 23 is Insomnia. Insomnia, it's a bit of a weird one because it's a film that I would say myself is Nolan's most underrated film, and yet here I am putting it right near the bottom of his movies on this list. Obviously I put Following just beneath it, but with regards to everything else he's done, this is pretty much bottom for me. Can I really call it underrated if I'm not putting it higher? I don't know. I know this is going to be pretty high for Cody Leach. I think this may even be his favourite Nolan film, which is very surprising to me. But it's still a really great film. If you like thrillers, cat and mouse games, that kind of thing, I think this is top notch stuff. And just seeing Al Pacino's character kind of losing the plot, being this city guy who's dealing with a level of guilt over something he's done, and then dealing with that in an environment that kind of forces him to stay awake the whole time because of the daylight. Just seeing his descent into madness as this killer kind of torments him and whatnot. It's a very good, expertly crafted psychological thriller. I've not seen the original because this is a remake, but I don't know if it would have the same kind of thing that went on with Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. If I'd seen the original first, would I like this one as much? I don't know, but I've seen this one, and it is a really great film. For many people, Memento is Nolan's first film and his best film. You know, if you look at it as his first movie that was kind of bought and paid for by a studio, as opposed to something that he kind of tinkled about with by himself over a year and funded himself. You know, many people I think would consider this his first proper film. I don't, obviously. I think, you know, Following is his first proper one, but there's a reason for that, and it's because of just how awesome it is. Nobody heard of Following. You know, it was a film that didn't get wide distribution. It was like, yeah, whatever. The art house folk maybe knew about it, but for most people, Memento was their introduction to Nolan. And what an introduction it is, you know, just playing with narrative form the way he does, with time, something that he's quite keen on playing with in his movies, looking at how time affects us, whether it's with regards to the audience and how you can manipulate the audience using time, or whether it's the characters themselves that are in his movies, how time affects them. But yeah, this film about a guy with short-term memory loss or long-term memory loss. You can only remember the past 2 minutes or so. So he's tattooing all this information on his body in order to help him find out who killed his wife. It's ingeniously thought up, it must be said. I know a lot of people who are detractors of Nolan will now say, oh, it's a gimmick and all this lot. It's not as clever as it thinks it is. It's like, well, yeah. Why didn't you come up with it then? You know, it's like it's very easy to say stuff in hindsight and retrospect, but Nolan was the one who did it. Nolan was the one who had the mindset to think, if we jumble this stuff around and make it work this way, boom. It's very clever, perhaps too clever for its own good in some cases, but I do think there is an emotional core at the heart of the film as well, particularly once the main character, played by Guy Pearce, finds out the truth. I think that's quite an emotional reveal. Number 21 is The Hateful Eight. Now, The Hateful Eight is the only film on this list that, well actually, it's one of 2 films on this list that I didn't manage to revisit before making this video, which is a shame. The other one was Girl with a Dragon Tattoo. So a rewatch of that, I think, it's one that I really wanted to get around to rewatching again, is Girl with a Dragon Tattoo. It may have affected the positioning of it, but as it stands, there you go. The other was, of course, The Hateful Eight. I didn't get to revisit it, but I have seen it a few times, so I'm reasonably certain of what my opinions are on it and where the film lies, and it lies here. It's a great film, really epic. Just love the way it's shot. You know, Tarantino digging these old lenses out that hadn't been used in decades, that really give us this panoramic John Ford style views of the Old West. It's beautiful to look at. It's a film that you can turn the sound off and just watch and bask in its beauty. So yeah, some people might think it was a little self-indulgent of Tarantino. I don't. I think it's cinema. It's what cinema's about. You know, cinema is a visual art form. So if you can do something to make more stunning visuals and bask in those visuals, that's cinema to me, you know. So it's not self-indulgent at all. That's what every director should be aspiring to make, is something that is a visual feast for the eyes. Beyond that, it's just got a lot of Tarantino's usual tricks. It just so happens those tricks are great tricks, you know, sparkling dialogue, tense situations which, you know, have really great characters in them and you don't know who's going to come out alive. It's just, yeah, it's a great film. Possibly a bit overlong. I think it touches a 3-hour mark, if I'm not mistaken. It's certainly getting on for that length of time. So it is a bit bum-numbing, but it's just expertly made. Before my most recent rewatch, Pulp Fiction would have been a bit further down on this list. I was never that as big into it as a lot of people. I think I don't know, maybe it was the age I first watched it, or maybe all the hype, I don't know. But watching it this time around for this list, I really got into it. I just think it is a great film. It just comes out of nowhere, doesn't it? And it's just like so many different characters and situations that you just don't expect to see. The dialogue is just, again, it kind of goes for a natural feel to the dialogue, but when you really look at it, it's not. It's clearly it's the way Tarantino speaks. You know, it's not the way most people speak. But in the same way that Sorkin has a certain kind of dialogue, it's not really the way most people speak. It's the way he makes his characters speak. Just because the dialogue is so great, it's full of zingers. You know, full of great little monologues and stuff. It's endlessly rewatchable. But some really great characters in it. Bruce Willis, giving one of his best characters, I think. You know, Willis has a bit of a habit of coasting these days in a lot of movies, but there are those odd gems where he just, boom, he gives us something great, and I think here as Butch, he does that. And obviously, Tarantino brought Travolta back from the brink, as he's done with a few actors, you know, taking these old actors who have kind of gone past the prime and then suddenly reminding us that they are great actors. It's a brilliant film. Again, I'm saying that a lot. It's a brilliant film. Just assume that from now on with everything else on this list, because we're into truly great filmmaking territory now. Gone Girl blew me away the first time I watched it. One of the first reviews on my channel, in fact, was my Gone Girl review way back when. I think on a repeat viewing, it doesn't quite have as much impact because you know what's coming, and it is a film that it has one of those twist endings and whatnot. It has a couple of twists actually. One of them I kind of saw coming. But that didn't matter. It didn't really affect the narrative. It was more a case of, well, how is that going to work out and how is it going to affect everything else? It's so brilliantly crafted, so well written, and I get hooked into these characters. And Ben Affleck is really great in it. It's just like I say, once you know what's coming, watching it again, that impact isn't quite as heavy on you, but that doesn't stop it being a really great movie, which is why it sits where it does. Tyler Perry is likeable in this movie. For that alone, this deserves to be high up. And number 18 is Kill Bill. Obviously, this is a film that was split into two when it was released theatrically, but it is still one film. It is two parts of one film. Tarantino considers it his fourth film, not his fourth and fifth film. The original intention was to release it as one. So either way, it's one film, Kill Bill, and it's just a rollicking roller coaster ride. It's a rampage of revenge, as it says in the trailer. It's just, great role for Uma Thurman. Some real badass action. Volume 1's got most of the action in it. I particularly like the setting in Japan. You know, I like samurai movies. I like Japanese culture. That really floated my boat. The second part, maybe not quite as strong in those areas, but it does have a bit more story, shall we say. I think there are a bit more of the character meat, shall we say. Once we find out about Beatrix Kiddo's child and what's happened with her, and we see the emotional response to that from Uma Thurman's character. There are a couple of scenes I would kind of take out and have taken out when I did my own fan edit of it, but I don't particularly like the scene in the hospital when she's comatose and some guy comes in and starts charging for... Anyway, if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. It's a bit too distasteful for me, that. But, Tarantino has a habit of going down those rabbit holes. This one for me was just a bit... I didn't enjoy that scene. But beyond that, everything else in it, all the action set pieces, is really great stuff. It makes me wish Tarantino would do another kind of just all-out action movie. The rest of this list now is so hard to decide. It really is. You know, I've made my choices, but even so, I've got my list just on the off on the side here, and I'm looking at it, and I'm just like, I can't. Any different day, things could be up or down, but it's just, for the sake of this video, this is what I've settled on. So yeah, at number 17, Inglorious Basterds is it's a fairy tale fantasy kind of revenge flick. You know, it's a what if. It's wish fulfillment. You know, every Jewish man's wish fulfillment. You know, just yeah. Again, it can seem in poor taste if viewed through the wrong lens. But if you look at this from the perspective of someone who would have really enjoyed getting that kind of vengeance, you can understand what you know. Like Eli Roth, I know is he's Jewish himself. I've heard him talk about this film in various interviews and see it from that perspective. It just, either way, it's shockingly violent at times. It's brilliantly written. It's got some of Tarantino's best characters, I think, in this. I think Brad Pitt is fantastic, absolutely hilarious. I think Christoph Waltz is fantastic, absolutely hilarious, but also scary when he needs to be. You know, he's a strange character because he's quite laughable at times. But then because of the power that is at his disposal and what he's willing to do with that power, that makes him scary as well. So yeah, it's a great film because it just takes you on an emotional roller coaster ride. It goes up and down in all different directions. You know, one moment it's an out and out comedy, the next minute it's an action film, the next minute there's moments of horror in it and thriller and just things that just creep you out and whatnot. It's just it's cinema. It's pure cinema. You know, it's Tarantino at his best. Obviously not right at his best because I've got more of his films above this one, but it's a 5-star film. You know, every film from this point onwards is a 5-star film. So if you really don't like the way I've ranked them from this point on, just please bear in mind everything from this point onwards is what I would call a 5-star film. So the rest of this list is perfection as far as I'm concerned. Jackie Brown for me is easily Tarantino's most underrated work. It is a film about people who are past their prime, who somehow manage to find a way to be relevant again, who somehow manage to find a way to show that they have the clout, show that they have the sense, the smarts to stay in the game. You know, you've got these, like I say, you know, the central character, Jackie Brown, she's a woman who's kind of fallen into a particular place in her career because essentially her career is over. You know, there's nowhere left for her to go, and she kind of sees a way out of that by doing a bit of smuggling and then gets embroiled in this case, and then you know, with the help of this bail bondsman, kind of concocts this plan to get one over on everybody, you know, on the crooks she's involved with and the police who are hunting her and whatnot, who are, you know, the police are kind of a bit younger than she is. And so yeah, it's a really great film. I think it's got some great character moments in it. I think it doesn't go quite as outrageous as other Tarantino movies do. You know, I think there's a bit more maturity to it in that sense. You know, there's no ears being cut off. There's no bringing out of any gimps. You know, I think because of that, maybe people feel that it's a bit tame for Tarantino or a bit not quite as memorable. But for me, it's the characters that make this film memorable. I like these characters and I like the way it's directed. I think it's got a good soundtrack too. You know, it's tapping into that whole blaxploitation cinema. Yeah, for me, it is Tarantino's most underrated. I think it deserves more love, and that's, yeah, it's a 5-star film for me, and that's why it's as high as it is. Dunkirk, for me personally, is one of the best war films that I think is out there. It's epic without being epic in running time. You know, this is Nolan's shortest film after Following. But before Dunkirk, he was getting into this habit of making each film longer. And I think actually since, was it Batman Begins maybe? Every film after Batman Begins that he did was longer than the last, was longer than the previous one, or maybe it was The Prestige. I know Dark Knight was longer than The Prestige, Inception was longer than The Dark Knight Rises was longer than Inception, then Interstellar was longer than The Dark Knight Rises. So yeah, like, you know, when it was announced he was going to do a war movie, you're kind of thinking, good grief, are we going to get like a 4-hour epic war movie? And no, it turned out that, you know, he made a film that was like around the 1 hour 40-minute mark, which when I heard that I was a bit shocked. I was rather shocked indeed. But no, it works. It's tense. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's tightly edited, really well paced. It doesn't give you the usual kind of character journeys in which people go on. You follow a particular person and they learn stuff and change throughout the course of the movie. No, what it does is it just throws you into the battle, and it zooms in on a few different people. We don't need to get their life story or anything. We're just with them. We're with them in this environment, and because of that, you're along for that ride. It's a roller coaster ride. It's tense. You know, you don't know who's going to get taken out, who's going to survive, whatnot. It's just, yeah, that's how I would describe it. It's a roller coaster ride, and yeah, I think Nolan crafts some really great visuals, you know, using that IMAX camera as he always does. It's cinema in its purest form. A great war movie, one of the best war movies, possibly my favourite, in fact. Stiff competition from Saving Private Ryan and a few others I can think of, but yeah, if I was doing a list of war movies, this probably cracked the top. Reservoir Dogs is another one, along with Pulp Fiction, of Tarantino's work where, you know, before I watched it again for this list, I thought it would probably be down near the bottom. It's one of those films where I think it's a very good film, but it's not one of my favourites. I watched it again this time around, you know, again for this list. It'd been a long time since I'd seen it, and I was like, why did I wait so long? It's an incredible film. It's a debut as well, you know. When you look at Reservoir Dogs, then someone tells you that's a debut film. That's someone's first movie as a director, first feature film as a director. That is. It's kind of like, and I know that Tarantino did make a feature film, as it happens, before Reservoir Dogs, but I think one of the reels got destroyed or whatever. So and it was literally like student level stuff anyway. You know, no studio back. It wasn't on the level of Following. I'll say that much. I have seen what of it there is that remains, but no, first proper film, you know, with backing. Reservoir Dogs, boom, it's just great performances, great dialogue, really tense moments between characters. We see this group of people who are, you know, reasonably friendly with each other. They are gangsters at the end of the day, so, you know, how much honour is there amongst thieves and whatnot? But no, we see that friendship, that we see some of the closeness between some of them just erode as everything turns to crap, you know. We don't actually see this bank robbery. We see the before the bank robbery, and we see the aftermath, and it just, yeah. Beforehand, it's a close-knit group that are really planning this thing, seem on the ball, and afterwards they're in disarray, everything falls apart, and crime, as it happens, does not pay. I love Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I've spoken to quite a few Tarantino fans, obviously Cody Leach and CP. I know CP's a big Tarantino fan. Them two in particular were not quite as big on this film. They still liked it, but they're not quite as... I love it. I love this film. I think with a few more watches, it could very well become my favourite Tarantino film. I love the era. I love the characters. Of all of Tarantino's movies, this has my favourite characters. Brad Pitt's character in this and Leonardo DiCaprio's character in this are my two favourite Tarantino characters, particularly Pitt's character. I love these guys. I love following them. In fact, when it goes away from them, I just want it to get back to them. I know a lot of the problems people have with this film are to do with Margot Robbie's character, but I loved that aspect. Particularly the first time I watched it, I thought it might diminish on the second time around because I know what Tarantino's doing with it, but it didn't. It took on a different meaning, is all. So the first time I watched it, I'm like, I know what's going to happen to this woman. You know, if you know the story, if you know what happened to Sharon Tate, then you know what's coming. So there's all the way through this film, when we see her and we're watching this young woman in a prime, on the cusp of making it big in Hollywood, her whole future ahead of her, and this impending doom is constantly working its way towards her throughout the film, which is scary, and it fills you with this sense of sadness at this life that was lost. And then it doesn't happen, you know. We have this triumphant ending where Tarantino does essentially what he did with Inglorious Basterds, where he rewrites history, and it gets me out of my chair. Like the first time I watched it, I cheered, I laughed. It was just funny. It was horrendous violence, but it's just so funny. You know, if it were in any other film, it would be quite horrific. But because of where the film's been leading, because of your expectations and how Tarantino's played with those expectations, it just becomes hilarious. You know, and I think only if you know the history, as I say, if you don't know the history of Sharon Tate, if you go into this film not knowing anything about her, then you're gonna be sat there thinking, what's all this nonsense? Why do they keep going to this woman that we don't know about or care about? You know, you do have to know your history, I think, to appreciate what the movie's doing. But like I say, the second time around, knowing where it goes, it filled me with an appreciation for life, for yeah, and you know, this was a woman who in history her life was taken from her, and you know, and that of her unborn child, and yeah, I don't know, I just feel like this is Tarantino having a bit more of a positive outlook on life, and having a bit of appreciation for those that we've lost, I guess. Again, it's a love letter to Hollywood, in much the same way Mank is a love letter to Hollywood. This film is too, but it's just better. I think it's much better. Again, like I said, I love the characters. I love the way that your expectations are played with. Like when Pitt goes to, you know, Tarantino has a habit of like offing real key characters, big characters. You know, you think of like Pulp Fiction with John Travolta's character. You know, his characters, no matter how big they are, they're not immune to just getting wasted halfway through the movie. So when Pitt's character rocks up at the Manson farm halfway through the film, I was dreading it, and it was really tense. You know, when he's making his way up into that house, I'm like, oh man, we're going to lose him, and it's something big's going to go down now. We're going to lose this character, and when we don't, I breathe this huge sigh of relief because I love the character, and by the end of the film, I love him even more because of that ending. So I have a blast with this film, as you can tell from my waffling on about it. I really appreciate it. I think it's the Tarantino film that is maybe going to be more appreciated over years as time goes by. Yeah, I love it. So Django Unchained is my favourite Tarantino movie. I do think that, again, as with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's got some of my favourite Tarantino characters. I think Pitt, again, in that film, he would be my favourite if I had to name one Tarantino character. But here as well, you know, DiCaprio is on form as the main villain. Christoph Waltz, again, proving that he should just always work with Tarantino, delivering fine work. I love his character in it. And I think Samuel L. Jackson as well turns out to be really despicable in this. You know, when you think about who he is, what he is, and what he turns out to be, it's just, he's the real villain of the story in the end, you know. It's just, yeah. You got DiCaprio's character who's clearly a racist, a slave driver, this, that, and the other. But then you've got Jackson's character who's a collaborator, and it's just like, it makes him really the true villain of the piece in many ways. But yeah, it's brilliantly written again. Tarantino's best work, I think. It's one of the best westerns ever made. It's just, there's not a dull moment in it. There's nothing I would take out. Every beat of this film is just greatness. I think, you know, obviously it's Tarantino's best film for me. There are no bits that sag. It's a masterpiece. Speaking of masterpieces, The Prestige, such an amazing character study about, you know, rivalry, about one-upmanship, about obsession being the primary theme, I think, in this film. Just, yeah, two guys who were once friends destroying each other because they're both obsessed with the same thing, about creating the perfect magic trick. And yeah, it's a lesson in what obsession can do to people's lives. It's, yeah, great drama, brilliant acting from both Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale. Some great twists and turns. Some I see coming, but because I think you're supposed to. I think there are some twists in this that are signposted by Nolan, because the whole film is playing like a magic trick where, you know, you show the audience the one thing and they zoom in on it so that they miss the thing you're distracting them with, and the distraction is the real twist at the end. And I think there's a twist with Bale's character which I think I saw coming a mile off, and I think I could be wrong, could be totally wrong. Maybe people didn't see it coming, but I saw it coming a mile off, and I felt like I was supposed to. I felt it was misdirection. I'd be curious to know actually other people's thoughts on that, but for me personally, I thought the twist with Bale's character was misdirection, and that the real twist was the stuff that happens with Jackman's character. And again, it's Nolan dissecting narrative, dissecting, because a magic trick is like a story. It's got a first act, a middle act, and a final act. Same with a story, you know, and Nolan is very interested in how we tell stories and in narrative form. And here I think that's what he's doing with this film. He's analysing the narrative form and doing it through the studying of a magic trick, and then kind of relating how that magic trick is performed to how he tells the story. He tells the story of The Prestige like a magic trick. So it's a great film. It's genius. It's Nolan again doing what Nolan does. He is my favourite director. If you know, unless you're new to my channel, I think it's a pretty safe bet what my number one's going to be. I think most people who know me, who are regulars to my channel, you already know what my top three, probably top four are going to be. So yeah, I am a Nolan fanboy. I make no apologies for that. But we'll move on. At one point, Fight Club was my favourite film of all time. It got into my number one spot, and it stayed there for a good number of years, 2 or 3 years. Yeah, it's diminished a little bit over the years. It's not quite as clever as it once was. It doesn't relate to me as much as it once did. It spoke to me in a big way when I was in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s. Because I didn't know what I was doing with my life. I felt that disconnection that the characters in this film feel from society, just consumerism, all that kind of stuff, just like what is life about? And I felt that disconnection. So I could relate to the narrator in the film. So the film spoke to me in so many ways. And I think growing up, I'm just touching 40 now, 40 years old this year, good grief. And I've got a wife, I've got children, I'm not 40 this year. I'm 41 this year. Good grief, I don't even know how old I am. I'm already 40. Oh, man, I feel old. Anyway, suffice to say, 20 years has passed since this first came out for me, and it spoke to me much more back then than it does now. I think now, having a family, having, I don't know, I guess a sense of purpose in life, knowing who I am a bit more, it doesn't quite speak to me as much. But it is still a masterclass of filmmaking, you know, with regards to technique, the techniques that Fincher uses, with regards to the twists and turns that, you know, are signposted all the way through the film. Like, you get to the end and there's no way that you should be surprised by the twist. But you are. You know, if you've seen it for the first time, I mean, this is a film that's so old now, everybody probably knows the twist anyway, but if you don't, and you didn't know it was coming, it sideswipes you, especially when you watch it and rewatch it, and you see that the whole time they're telling you all the way through. But yeah, it's a great film, excellent characters, that has a lot to say about the modern world, about men in the modern world. If you know me, you will know that I'm a huge Aaron Sorkin fan. So when you couple my Sorkin fandom with my huge Fincher fandom, well, Social Network is a brilliant film. You know, one of the best screenplays that's on this list. If you look at all the films on this list, Social Network for me. Sorkin is probably my favourite writer, to be honest. He has a particular style which I think will probably grate on some people's nerves once they've seen a lot of his work and you realise, okay, that's how he writes, but I love it. I love that. I love how he writes. He has a particular voice, a particular way of speaking through his work, and I love it. Huge fan of The West Wing right here. But yeah, that he brings that here. It's a great story about loneliness and friendship and how that works, and you know how this one man who created the Social Network could very well be the loneliest man on the planet. It's touching, it's moving, it's got some great performances. Andrew Garfield is great in this, Jesse Eisenberg as well. Even Justin Timberlake, to be honest, is very watchable in this. You know, made me think that he had some credibility as an actor. 7 is the film on this list that I most recently rewatched, and it's just fantastic, isn't it? Absolutely fantastic. So Fincher gets away from the studio, gets away from 20th Century Fox. You know, he got murdered practically on Alien 3 by 20th Century Fox and their interference. So he puts himself into a position where if he doesn't have complete control, he's out. And from this point on in his career, he becomes a master filmmaker. He knows what he needs to do to get control, and he sticks with it. And as a result of that, 7 is just, yeah, it's absolutely, it's up there. Everything about this film is spot on. There's not a bad moment in it. It's brilliantly paced, brilliantly directed. The performances are great. The characterizations are absolutely fantastic. I love the two central characters. You know, it's about generations and that kind of thing. You've got this young whippersnapper detective who really wants to get into the game. You've got this old seasoned veteran who wants to get out of the game, who's seen too much, who's a bit jaded, has a very dark look of the world, very dark view of the world. And, you know, he's working his last case, which just happens to be this serial killer who is killing people using the 7 deadly sins as his kind of calling card, so to speak. And it just, through that, he holds a mirror up to society, and you know, a society that seems to just not care and seems to be wallowing in sin and dying in it, drowning in it. You know, and there's a line that he says at one point where he says, these days you can't just go over and tap someone on the shoulder, you've got to hit them over the head with a shovel, which is kind of his methodology. So, but clearly this guy is wrong, clearly this guy is a wacko, but there is there is reasoning. There is reason within his methodology, within his madness, where, you know, if he'd have taken a different approach, perhaps he could have done something to help clean up society, but instead he becomes part of that disease, part of that filth, and kind of proving his point in many ways. But yeah, like I say, I love the characters. The twist is great, highly emotional. The characters are fantastic. It's just absolutely grade A stuff. Inception is one of those films, as with much of Nolan's work, where you really had to stay engaged, and you probably had to watch it again. You probably didn't get everything on the first watch, and it's just, yeah, it's a mind bender. It takes you all over the place, makes you do somersaults in your head trying to keep up with what's going on. At one point, one character even says, you know, like, whose dream are we in now? And that's kind of like how the audience feels. But yeah, it's just the story, the concept that Nolan came up with this. You know, he's just so blooming talented when it comes to ideas, when it comes to formulating story ideas. You know, some people think he's too clever for his own good, but as I said before with Memento, no one else is coming up with this stuff. No one else is thinking the way that Nolan thinks, you know, to come up with the ideas that he has and put them on the screen. It's just, he's in a league of his own. And yeah, Inception, you just told me the idea behind it before the film came out. I'd have had no clue how you would make that work. How would you visualize it? How would you bring that to the screen? And Nolan, being an auteur, the auteur that he is, he just, nails it. It's a great film. I would say that it doesn't quite have the emotional warmth that some of his other work has, and I think Nolan has been accused of being a bit too cold at times. I completely disagree with that, to be honest. I think most of his work actually has a lot of heart. He is Kubrick with heart. All the Kubrick fans start shouting at me and cursing me out, but I'm sorry, it's true, and I am a Kubrick fan, big Kubrick fan. But for me, he's Kubrick with a bit more heart. I just think that of his films, I'm not as emotionally warm to... I've said this before in my review, so I don't want to go into it in a big way, but it's mainly the character of Mal. She's such a cold character. We don't get to see much of who she was before she lost the plot, and I get why. I understand that, you know, before people start actuallying me in the comments, but even so, I would have liked to have seen a bit more humanity with her, so that we feel that loss more with DiCaprio's character. But regardless of that, it is still just such a great movie, from all the technical aspects and the juggling, the narrative juggling that Nolan does. Just astounding. So Zodiac, for me, is Fincher's best film, which says something about my top 5. You know, clearly I'm a Nolan fanboy. There's no more Tarantino left. There's no more Fincher left. So my top 5 are all Nolan movies. This isn't something I've tried to hide. I openly admit I'm a Nolan fanboy, but there you go. But yeah, Zodiac for me is Fincher's best film. It is a horror thriller, kind of true story, historical drama kind of thing. For me, it's the characters. Every time I watch it, I get so engrossed in the characters because of Fincher's attention to detail. You know, he leaves no stone unturned, and the characters are just so believable as a result. And I'm invested in the case. I'm invested in their work, in what they've put in what they've lost by putting so much into this case. And knowing that these were real people, knowing this is a true story, and knowing that Fincher has done his due diligence and put that work in, it makes me feel a lot more invested, you know. Seven and Zodiac, they were really neck and neck, and I think the thing that clinches it for me is knowing that this is a true story, knowing that, yeah, all that stuff I've just mentioned, it gets me super invested. And, you know, I've seen it a lot now, I've seen it quite a few times, and even though I know what's coming, every time I still get invested. I still get gripped by the minutiae of this case. You know, all the little details that get missed and then get picked up by someone else, whether it's Graysmith or the detectives or whatever. It's just, that's how real life police work happens. You know, there's no smoking gun in real police work. It's not this one thing that kind of fixes the whole case. It's little things. It's an accumulation of little things that builds up a case. So yeah, it's incredible stuff. Tenet, to me, it's my favourite film of last year. I absolutely loved it. I've seen it 3 times now. I went to see it twice at the cinema because I wanted to be sure of how I felt about it when I reviewed it. I feel like a lot of people have been down on it because they don't get it. I'm not usually one of those people who say, oh, it's just because you don't get it. But I think in this case, it genuinely is. And that's not just me. I think a lot of people who I've seen review it, who don't like it, have literally said themselves, I don't get it. Couldn't keep up with it, didn't have a clue what was going on. So I understand that. I feel like if you're out, if you're not following it, then that is definitely. I've had that happen to me in films where, for whatever reason, you zone out and you suddenly don't know what's going on, and you lose interest. I think because I'm such a Nolan guy, I went into this. I made sure I'd had sleep. I knew it was going to be pretty plot heavy and whatnot, and I stayed with it through that first watch, and I felt like I got it on the first watch, and so I went back and watched it again to see if I really had got it, and I felt like I had, and I even got a few more gaps filled in, you know, and I bought it on Blu-ray, and I've had even more gaps filled in. So it's one of those films that rewards repeat viewings, and I love those kind of movies. I also think that it has the narrative gymnastics that Inception has, but it also has a bit more warmth to it, and that comes mostly from Debicki's character. I think her character is the character that really has the arc. You know, we're following Washington's character. You know, he's the protagonist. He's even called the protagonist in the film, but I don't really think it's his arc. He doesn't really go on a character arc, so to speak. He is essentially the same person at the beginning as he is at the end. He just knows more information. Whereas Debicki's character, she's the one who has the change. She's the one who goes on the journey. She's the one who finds the strength to take down this brutal villain who is essentially, you know, keeping her prisoner. So it's really her journey, and it is an emotional one. I think it's got a lot of warmth to it, a lot of heart. So yeah, for me, it's a film that has the intellect, the narrative gymnastics of Inception, but it's also got a bit more heart, and it's that kind of puts it slightly above Inception for me, by a thin hair, like I say. But no, I love it. I've watched it multiple times now, and I get more out of it every time I do. Being a huge science fiction nut, Interstellar it ticks all my boxes. You know, it pushes all my buttons. It is 2001: A Space Odyssey, but well paced. Again, Kubrick fans shouting at me, I like 2001, don't throw arrows. I love 2001, it's a great film, but come on, could do with being a bit shorter. No, I think it's also got a bit more heart to it than 2001. A bit more. There's multiple times in this movie where I literally shed tears. I find it highly emotional, but also I love the science behind it. I love the science fiction behind it. I'm a sci-fi guy. I do run a Facebook group called Cine Sci-Fi. So if science fiction is your thing, head on over to Cine Sci-Fi on Facebook and join that group, because we talk science fiction movies there. But yeah, this, as I say, it's everything I love about sci-fi movies. Really intelligent ideas about the meaning of existence, about science versus faith, about existential questions. Without giving you hard and fast answers, but allowing you to kind of go off and think yourself about what those answers might be. So yeah, everything that I love about sci-fi. Yes, of course, the Dark Knight trilogy. I've said this many times, I've done this many times, I'll be doing it again pretty shortly because I've got my top 100 movies video coming up. So there you go, that's ruined already. But you know, even if you didn't see this video and you know me, you know my channel, you already knew that this was going to be the case. The Dark Knight trilogy is my favourite trilogy. They are my favourite set of movies of all time. I know people are shouting at me now saying, what, even The Dark Knight Rises? Duh, it's got this wrong with it, this wrong with it, this... Look, it's a subjective experience, and as a Batman fanatic, okay, I love Batman. Batman is the character that not only got me into comics, it got me into movies. You know, Batman has shaped my life in such a huge way, and Nolan is my favourite director. Everything about these films speaks to me. It ticks my boxes, you know, it does for me what I want movies to do. So I recognise that there are imperfections in this trilogy. I genuinely do. I understand the case for why you might say other films on this list are better. But this isn't a list about what I think is better, it's what are my favourites. I've put these films in the order of my favourite, and the Dark Knight trilogy is they're my favourite movies of all time. There you go. For whatever reason, my subjective reasoning, they're my favourite movies of all time. My favourite characters, my favourite director. I love them. So that's it. Dark Knight trilogy is essentially my number one. It's my number 3, 2, and 1. But yeah, as I've said before, collectively they kind of make my favourite movie of all time. Let me know how your lists would stack up, and let me know what you think about mine. What do you think of some crazy ass choices I've made, which let's face it, is about par for the course with me. But yeah, no. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching this video, and until next time, cracking.